Americans and their voting patterns and their habits and stuff like that. And that's really where you see a lot of this going on. A lot of the people who are responsible for these kind of people getting elected are people who either they're lacking some sort of education, or they might, their system of beliefs is simply based on their culture. So it's almost like, but at what lengths are they willing to go? Because they voted Trump into office, but they're about to see how jacked their taxes and their health care is about to be if they keep supporting this dude. Like, the very people supporting these people are the very ones who are actually going to get screwed over. So what is it going to take for people to see that?
Well, and we had a chat from Gina, and she was also mentioning that historically we don't vote. And not just we, but people don't vote. And, it's not just African Americans that don't vote. You have all kinds of folks that don't vote for a variety of ridiculous reasons. Some people have said, well, my vote doesn't count. Or they already have predicted that the election is going to be won by Mbezi, so I don't need to vote. Those types of really lame excuses for not voting. Right. And then...
super lame.
Right. And then when you combine that with the gerrymandering and all the foolishness like you had going on in Florida, then you have a real mess. And that's how you end up with these types of things. It would be one thing if you ran a campaign against Thinbad, you brought the issues out, and just like politics does, Thinbad was the worst dog catcher we ever had. I'll be a better dog catcher, and let the chips fall where they may, which is politics. But when you have suppression going on, you have apathy that's overtaking some communities, that's when you really have your challenges to the democratic process. And then you end up with representatives that that don't represent you well.
But I think the one thing that people fail to look at is, like, I don't know. I think what really bugs me about the choices people have been making in terms of these elections and stuff is like, okay, you voted for this person because they said something racist that appealed to you, or because they're different, quote unquote. But, like, look at the state of our country now. Like, and it's like these same people can't even take responsibility for how crappy our country is right now. Like, we are not in a very diplomatic position. Our allies overseas, if they're even still allies, don't even take us seriously. The world doesn't take us seriously. I mean, it's just like, what I really think, honestly, aside from the societal beliefs and everything, I think that this really speaks volumes on the education system in America, because these people are really not getting it. They don't get it.
Yeah, and the other thing, we had a chat from Susan, and she was saying that this lady also is against healthcare. Now, when you use the statistics that Thinbad just quoted in terms of all the social and economic challenges that are going on in that state, how can you possibly be against having the ability to get your body fixed? That's and that's one of the things that I don't understand. Now, I certainly get that people are concerned about budgets and spending and all these other types of things. And you need to be fiscally prudent with your money. I get that. But when you're talking about if you get a knot on the side of your neck, and all of us are going to have to go to the doctor for something, you know what I mean? And then you get there and they say, well, in order for us to fix that, number one, this knot is going to eventually stop you from breathing. And in order to fix it, you need these pills. But, oh, by the way, these pills are $200 a pill, and you need one every day of the month. and you don't want that kind of care. I don't get it. You guys help me understand that.
Meanwhile, people always want to talk about how overseas, oh, their taxes are so bad and this and that. But guess what? They get free health care.
Well, exactly.
So it's like, I don't think, it's just one of those things where it really does go back to education, because that's just like people were saying when they were trying to repeal Obamacare. They were asking people in the voting polls about the Affordable Care Act, and they're like, oh, that's way better than Obamacare. That is Obamacare. Like, people did not even know what it was. So it's like, I really think that it's just kind of one of those things where people don't realize what's really going on until it personally affects them. Like, those people are not going to realize what they've done voting wise until they do have a crisis and they go to the hospital and they can't afford to get the health care that they need, unfortunately.
Right. And Thin Bad, I mean, you are the political ace here. I mean, you've seen it, done it all. Why do people vote against their own interests? Can you help me with that?
Yes, please.
I think it's all just fear and hate, and what's the saying? You hate what you fear. You fear what you don't understand. You hate what you fear. I think people, the election between Espy and Hyde Smith was something that would, okay, you can choose the old Mississippi or the new, and try to go in a new direction, because what I talked about before in terms of them having a hard time with education and things like that. They were starting to attract. They're trying to turn a corner, and they're starting to attract some other businesses, some big ones. Mississippi isn't just the Black Delta anymore, but they've got beaches. They've got some casino stuff going on. It's Mississippi is the home to Toyota and Nissan. So they've got some. There's some positive things happening. But the hope would have been, you'd have thought that, okay, Mississippi is ready to come into the 20th century. Mississippi is just trying to play catch up. That's why I used to always just feel certain places that when you went there, like everything turned black and white. Like everything, the color was gone. It was like you went back like 50 years when you went to certain states. But they are trying to become a new South and kind of lose that old reputation. But when they come in, and as MBZ said, 8 out of 10 voted, the folks voted for, and I'm assuming that was that statistic 8 out of 10 voters or 8 out of 10 white voters? Or did it say?
It didn't.
Or it just said Mississippi. Right? Yeah. So whatever number it is, whatever group that was, I hope it was just a group and not the whole state. Whatever it was, they seem to vote to hang on to the past and end up, as you said, to their own detriment. It's just like back in slavery days. People are so focused on keeping the black folks down, but they don't think about it that they got to stay there and hold them down.
Yep.
So they're both losing out. Yep. So as I said, the rising tide lifts all boats. So if black folk are doing well and they're able to work and be productive citizens and pay into the tax base grows. You're able to have more money for public education, but people don't. They don't want to listen to that. They rather hear somebody say some of the ridiculous, divisive stuff and believe the fear and the hate mongering that goes on. And Hyde Smith was made, more permissible because we got a president in the office, a resident in the White House, who talks just as crazy as she does.
Exactly.
So it's not any. And he came in the day before or the day of, and she credits him for taking her over. But again, with those numbers that MBZ stated, I don't know if she really needed his help.
Well, and one of our chatters just mentioned that unfortunately people don't do research for themselves. They will, if they like Thin Bad or they like Thin Bad on MSNBC or Thin Bad on Fox or whatever network, and you say that the sky is purple even though it's blue outside, that's what they're going to believe. They're not going to research it. They're not going to bother to peek out the window. They heard you say it's purple outside, so it must be purple outside.
Right. Yeah, people are just crazy. As I said, you can go through a whole week and never hear another viewpoint if you don't want to, because the news stations are so polarized. If you want to hear straight conservative stuff, you go to Fox. If you want to hear liberal stuff, on the other end of the spectrum, you go to MSNBC. It's hard to find balance in news anymore, and people don't have to come together, and you're not going to be able to come together and compromise, because that's the only way really good legislation is ever made, through compromise.
That's correct.
Where everybody gets a little bit of something, but nobody gets everything.
That's
but
correct.
You can't do that if you're at polar opposites all the time, and then when you come together, all you're doing is screaming at one another. And this is why we are where we are. So hopefully in 2020, because she's only elected to finish out a term. Hopefully in 2020, they are able to galvanize enough stuff. I don't know. I mean, you got to hope against hope that they can do that, or that she does something so ridiculous that they end up, saying we can't do this.
Well, let me ask you this: Do you ever see a time again where now this is back when you and I were teenagers and so forth, where you had the relationships like your Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, where you had two opposing ideologies, but they were respectful of the institutions and respectful of America versus the Democratic or Republican Party. Now, they didn't always agree on a whole lot of things, but you never had or at least I never had the feeling at that age in my life that there was just a deliberate, let's push everything over the cliff no matter what we have to do to get our way. And do you ever see us returning to that then, Bad, from your political statesmanship perspective?
You would hope. I mean, you can only hope, and you can only work to that end. My grandmother used to say, if you see a good fight, get in it and throw a punch if you got to. I mean, and that's a good fight to try to get folks back on the line. It's like, hey, let's start worrying about people, humanity, and the country, and the globe. I mean, not to mention all of this climate control stuff that's going on. I mean, stuff is real, and it's these folks that are in office, that just kind of push it to the side, like, that's all right, because it's not going to affect them. But what about your kids, and what about your kids' kids, and what about, all these generations unborn? All of this fighting and bickering, you might, get through the rest of your life without it really affecting you, but it's going to affect people who carry your name, people who carry your blood, and just people who are just, your brothers and sisters from a Christian standpoint, from a universal standpoint anyway. So however you look at it, again, the rising tide lifts all boats, and you've got to come together. You got to compromise. You may not get everything you want, but you got to get something. As it is now, it's all or nothing. It's a zero-sum game, it seems like. Gone are the days of the real statesmen and the diplomats. Back in the day, the people who had to figure out ways to work together, like you said, Tip O'Neill, the guys who and the gals and women who all worked behind the scenes. A lot of them you didn't see what was going on or what they were doing, but they were working for the betterment of the country. And with an eye toward helping as many people as possible, as opposed to trying to hold down as many people as they can. It's like business first around here.
Well, I think that this has been a great discussion on these elections. So when we come back, let's switch it up a little bit and let's talk about our president and this climate change. Very interesting, these comments that he just had. So we'll be right back.
You're listening to Straight No Chaser. We'll be right back.
DWI, even at first, it's pretty harsh. You don't realize, you know?
Up to 90 days in jail.
Can't be there for my family.
I'm in here. They're out there.
They put an ignition interlock in your car for 1 year.
Car won't start unless you blow into it.
It's embarrassing.
You gotta pay fees, get a lawyer.
Need to see my probation officer for testing all the time.
Have to pick up garbage.
It literally consumes your life.
I lost